I think that this trade's really interesting. I actually think it's a lot more interesting, and maybe you disagree, Ken. Maybe like our listeners and viewers disagree. It feels like social media disagrees, which is fine. I don't even say that as a slight. That people are talking about this from like the Houston perspective and how exciting it is that Diggs joined C.J. Stroud and like the electric playmakers on this offense. And I said earlier, maybe Diggs will be the third best receiver on his own team. I didn't mean that as an insult to Diggs. It's like Diggs kind of like really fell off last year, and Nico Collins and Tank Dell are both great. In any event, like they're going to have three awesome receivers and an awesome tight end in Dalton Schultz. And like Joe Mixon isn't what he once was, but still, look what Devin Singletary did last year. Like Joe Mixon could have a nice year in this offense for the Houston Texans. Bobby Slowick's back, obviously, as the offensive coordinator. I think this trade is so much more interesting from the Buffalo perspective and what like Buffalo is going to be this season on offense. I don't want to say this makes me like Buffalo more, because obviously, like, you lose Stefon Diggs, even if he's on the downslope a little bit, like, he's still, like, a really good receiver. Even if he's not, like, on the Justin Jefferson tier anymore, like, he's, like, right below that probably. Like, he's still going to be really awesome. But from, like, a team-building perspective, if you're Buffalo, and if Diggs has got all this drama going on off the field with Josh Allen, and, you know, we've been on the air, Ken, as Brandon Beane, Bills GM, has addressed the media in Western New York, and I just saw some people tweet about this, and this is like, it's not a surprise, that Beane, who's normally very open, honest, and transparent with the media, more so than I think a lot of GMs and coaches are, isn't really saying much about this and is kind of like biting his tongue a little bit. It's pretty obvious that Diggs is beefing with Josh Allen, that there's something up there, that Diggs had become persona non grata, and Diggs was complaining. You know, when he got traded from Minnesota to Buffalo, he had missed a bunch of practices, missed a bunch of team meetings while still putting up big stats, and kind of like forced his way out of Minnesota. Comes to Buffalo, has a great first season, has a couple great regular seasons following that. This is now the second time that Diggs has kind of pulled this act at the end of his tenure with the team. And for what it's worth, had great playoff performances in 2020, like getting the Bills to the AFC Championship game, their first playoff loss to Kansas City. But since then, like the playoff performances for Diggs have not been great. And this is not to say he's not a good player, but he's not showed up in the biggest games for Buffalo. And that's literally like while he's there, like to get them over the top to win a Super Bowl. You know, a couple years ago in the Gabe Davis, like Jerry Rice game, 3 catches, 7 yards. Last year in the loss to Cincinnati in the snow at home in the divisional round that we took a bath on. We bet the Bills in that game. Four catches for 38 yards. And then in the loss to Kansas City this past January, 3 catches, 21 yards, and the biggest drop of the season. And I tweeted, and it got retweeted like a million times, which is great. Like, Stefon Diggs wants to be the man. You can't drop that pass. Like, you just can't drop it. And I bring up this George Young quote that he had as GM of the Giants, the Hall of Fame GM of the Giants, right? The architect of the Parcells teams that ended up winning 2 Super Bowls in 86 and 90. When Brad Van Pelt, like one of their linebackers at the time, like really good linebacker, wanted a contract extension. They ended up moving on from Brad Van Pelt. And George Young said to Brad Van Pelt, we won 2 games with you. We can win 2 games without you. So it's like Buffalo, like we lost to Kansas City with you, Stefon Diggs. We can lose to Kansas City without you. We can lose to the Chiefs if you are not there. They never got to the Super Bowl. I don't think this is some like catastrophic loss for the Bills, and I get it. The receiving core looks brutal right now with Samuel and Matt Collins and Khalil Shakir, and maybe Kincaid takes a step forward. They'll add a couple guys in what everyone, including Brian Baldinger, says is a really deep draft. And Ken, I think we'll get an answer to this question. How close is Josh Allen to Patrick Mahomes? Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs trade Tyreek Hill a couple off seasons ago, sign Marquez Valdes-Scantling, win the Super Bowl 2 years in a row. Mecole Hardman with the winner in overtime a couple months ago. Is Josh Allen good enough to elevate these curtain-jerking jabronis at receiver? I think he might be. I think he just might.
I think what makes awards fun, but also drives you crazy sometimes, if you didn't have the poll, you'd think Luka was a little interesting. And we did this a couple days ago, and I poured cold water on it. I was like, look, I need way more than what's going on right now to make a bet. That was like what we did a couple days ago. And that was definitely proven by what happened in the poll, thankfully. But, you know, like if you just follow like the recent noise around any award, it doesn't have to be this one, this is why like you're never totally sure, like, is it a real thing or not? Because, like, you know, Jokic says it should be Luka, and there's a piece in The Athletic, and everyone's talking about it, and Mark Cuban's tweeting about it, that all the Mavs fans need to go find voters for the award and pester them. Like, there's this buzz around this topic, and then like the reality sets in of like, yeah, you know, everything you heard about for like 24 hours, yeah, meaningless, doesn't matter at all actually. And this is what always gives you hesitation, you know, like there's a huge media campaign right now for Kobe White to win most improved player. The Bulls Twitter account, ton of reporters, like there are a ton of stories written about him. There's a push for this that's lasted about 3 weeks. But is this like a Luka thing? And then the actual voting will happen and Tyrese Maxey wins. Or, you know, like Nas Reed's sixth man, you can make the same argument. And then we get to the voting and Malik Monk just wins. That one's a little different because Monk's hurt too, and there's, I think, a couple other variables there. But it's, to be fair, like in some ways it follows the same pattern. You're never quite sure. Flacco comeback player of the year. Everybody making noise, but then people are like, well, it's DeMar Hamlin still. And it kind of was. He got way more firsts. But you're never sure, like, what does the buzz equal? Does it equal nothing, something, all the votes? Like, this is what makes things so confusing. And we had a perfect, usually you don't get the poll after the fact. Like, to like right after the fact to be like, no, see how everybody was wrong? You usually don't get it. There's no polling for most of these other awards. This one, you get it. You can just compare it to 3 days ago and be like, well, then what the hell was all that noise about? Like, what was going on here? It's just like, again, a reminder of like, you pay attention to all that stuff, but you kind of have to weight it with like how this normally goes. I guess would be the right way to put it. Jokic is first in everything that matters, and his team isn't first. And I think that's what made this one so easy. And Matt, one of the ways I think it can be a wild postseason is kind of like the introduction of the Philadelphia 76ers into this bottom half of the bracket. What seed are they? Can they get to the 6? That was like a big discussion this morning. If they're in the play-in and they play Milwaukee, what happens? So there's a lot of ways this can go. From a betting standpoint, like just how interesting do you think the Sixers are to achieve some great things this postseason?
I'm extremely interested in because I've been betting them consistently. I heard at All-Star that they were behaving at the trade deadline like they were expecting Embiid to come back. Everything I heard was like, yeah, no, there's like an optimism that he's going to return, and everyone was still a little skeptical. But for me, that was enough for me to be like, look, if he returns, I think they snap back to being that level of team. He may not be there. He's not going to be there. You can see it last night. It's going to take a while, and that's fine. I think there's time. I think there's opportunity. I've been betting them pretty consistently, especially in finals matchups. So Nuggets, Sixers is a bet that I think has a lot of value right now. I do think when I looked at the schedules, I do think the Sixers get to the 6th seed, which is going to get them probably Cleveland, given New York's injury situation. That's a pretty soft lay in the first round in terms of like where you're going to your path to the conference finals. And then Milwaukee, who I'm just hoping against hope gets Miami in the first round, drags them out, and then the Sixers get them. And then you've got a conference ticket at a big number for them versus the Celtics, and we can figure that out later. But I've been on them consistently. I think they were a top 3 seed, and they were going to be a team that did the 40-20 rule, 40 wins before 20 losses before Embiid went down. I think they're extremely well built. And most importantly, if you rank the playoff coaches in the Eastern Conference, the list is Eric Spoelstra, Nick Nurse. You can have whoever you want the rest of the way. Those are the only 2 I want. So I think there's a lot of value right now in the Philadelphia 76ers.